G'day, fans, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Talking Stuff. I'm here with my lad Aaron to talk about science fictions, which is very, very groovy. Mr. Aaron, how are you going tonight, old son? We're back again after another week. Yay, team.
I'm doing absolutely fantastic. Had a busy week, a busy day. Lots have been going on at the moment. So it's good to be able to sit back, relax, and talk about stuff for an hour.
Oh, I love talking about stuff. It's been very, very, very exciting stuff. What's been happening now? Quickly, we've got a lot of things to cover off, and I'm just trying to get myself into the zone because now that we're on air and there are people watching and all the rest of it. And Christy's the first one who's joined us. Hello, all and sundry. Absolutely magnificent. So, Mr. Aaron, what have you been up to, old son?
Well, I'll get through this as quick as I can. For people who are long-time viewers, they may know that the shop had a mascot called Curly that was a pit droid. And Curly went back to his maker to get fixed up because he got a bit scratched and dented, and we haven't seen him since. He's Curly on the run. So I've been looking for a replacement droid for Curly. And I think today I actually came across a replacement droid for Curly. He's about the same size. He's from science fiction as well. He predates Curly. He's an older model, and you get two for the price of one. Of course, it's Twiki and Dr. Theopolis. Do you think they'd be good shop attendants?
What a guy. I have no objections.
So there you go. And I think Dr. Theopolis should know that no one gets paid. But
I know about that.
Came across them in a collection today, and I thought that was an absolutely awesome prop replica. You really don't see much Buck Rogers stuff.
Yeah, I got to say, I mean, so Aaron sent me through the pictures just today, in fact, only a few hours ago. That's what you call getting in on things very, very quickly. And to see an actual one-to-one scale Twiggy with Dr. Theopolis. Is it Theopolis or Theophilus?
Yeah. It's all Greek to me.
Yeah, well, exactly right. Absolutely spectacular with the lights and all the rest of it. That is actually very, very groovy. So I want to see it, though. Can you sort of plug it in to get it to do the disco dance as it did in the pilot episode? And then you get Tina coming along and goes, boogie, 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 bitty, bitty, bitty.
I'll tell you what. We'll get them to do that, and you can do the space roller skating disco.
Oh, yeah, absolutely fantastic. Oh, here we go. Straight away. Colin's already asking, is Twiggy for sale? Oh, I'll tell you what. What do you reckon there, Mr. Aaron?
Well, we don't sell sentient life forms, do we?
Otherwise, I'd be up for sale. Oh, hang on, you said sentient, didn't you? Jeepers creepers.
So that was my interesting day today. I thought I'd share that because you just don't see stuff like that very much.
Very, very cool. A couple of people have joined us a bit late, so just for the sake of it, we get to show it all over again for those who missed it the first time.
Past.
Hang on. Oh, hang on. Where's my picture? No, hang on. Whoop, here we go.
What a guy. I have no objections.
There we go. Very, very cool stuff. How good is that? Check out your Twiggies. Now, you would have seen everybody. There was a picture of good old George Lucas there, a bit of a Star Wars theme this evening. As it turns out, it's been announced today that Mr. George Lucas is going to be given the Palme d'Or at Cannes this year. So it was only announced, I think, yesterday or the day before. And he's getting that on International Star Wars Day, which is May the 25th, for his work in the science fiction and especially the visual effects industry, which is particularly cool. What do you reckon about that, Mr. Aaron?
Well, I do think it's something that's obviously well-deserved. I mean, let's face it, a lot of us here wouldn't be friends and wouldn't know each other and wouldn't be doing the things we do if it wasn't for George Lucas. Do you think that if it had just been Battlestar Galactica, that there'd be a Glenn A. Larson Day? I don't think so.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I remember, I can't remember what year it was. It was a number of years ago. Some people were trying to do a video to send to George Lucas, might have been his birthday or a celebration or an anniversary or whatever. And to say, you know, whether he got it or not, I got no idea. But anyway, these people are trying to do this video. You talk to the camera, say to George Lucas, give him a message. And I thought that's an impossible thing to do for especially someone like myself, you know, got involved with Star Walking and running conventions and blah, 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 blah. And so how do you sum that up in like 20 or 30 words? And I found that quite difficult. What?
Dear George, you have kept me broke my entire life.
It's interesting because you are right. Everything sort of came from there. And of course, I can backtrack my entire life practically to when I saw Star Wars back in 77 in the cinema. And as I've said to a lot of people go to the movies, they see a movie, they come out the other end 2 hours later and they go, well, there you go, that's 2 hours done and dusted. But for me, it was like a complete transformation into a different person. has led me on this path to where I am now. So I totally agree with you. If it wasn't for Star Wars, I certainly, a lot of the people that I know now, I wouldn't know. Yeah, it's an interesting sort of part of history, and which is fantastic. So he's getting this award, and yeah, good on him too. So
yeah, I think it's well deserved.
Christy, obviously pick this one up. Have you changed your name? Yes. Explain the name, dude. What is the deal with that?
Well, I just thought I'd spice things up tonight. This is obviously Han Solo's call sign from the Family Guy Empire Strikes Back, Carlos Spicy Wiener. So I will only answer Dags tonight if he calls me Carlos Spicy Wiener, much in the way that we have to call him Dags and not the other D word.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, don't say dickhead, because that's the other D. I like this one. Blake, my next door neighbour, is joining me, which is absolutely fantastic. So there you go, old son. If I speak loudly enough, he won't even need the speakers. He'll just hear me through the walls, which is particularly cool. And it is all good, fun stuff. And I do like this one. Dear George, like the beard. And that's a joke, of course, because Rusky Babes has had a beard his entire life. But in fact, I'll tell you a funny story. Just a quick aside. When we're doing a Star Wars fan film in 2004, Rusky Babes actually turned up. He was wearing a checkered shirt. And he actually, because Russell's always had a beard, someone took a picture, stuck it on the internet, and said, "Oh, George Lucas visited the set and said the film needed more Ewoks." And some people believed it was actually George Lucas.
Well, that's actually funny, because George Lucas came into the shop once, and I got a photo with him, and I posted it on Instagram and said, "Look, Russell Devlin was in today."
Oh my God. Absolutely fantastic. That is very, very cool. All right. So that's what's going on. So it's just very, very good. We'll probably talk about the George Lucas thing a little bit later on, which is kind of cool. Now, it's funny. We're going to discuss a few Star Wars things tonight, but this thing popped up today. I saw this today and I go, holy crap, what is the deal with this? And for those who don't know, it's a thing called Aliens Expanded. Do you have any idea what this is, Mr. Aaron?
Well, as far as I know, the 4K version of Aliens came out in December, and what they love to do, they got all the fans to buy the version that came out, and when they bought the version that came out, they announced, and we're doing a special edition of it coming out in about 3 or 4 months' time, and this is the special edition. So the original Aliens on 4K has all the original extras that have been released before, but this is new feature-length extra about the restoration and behind the scenes. And they've got most of the cast and crew back to talk about Aliens.
It goes for 4 hours, I found out. And you are right. I mean, some of the cast have actually passed away since then. But and James Cameron is really driving this. And this, I only saw this today, and the thing only just came out. And it's like a documentary. And as you said, yeah, regarding the movie. And apparently, if you purchase this or purchase something, you actually get your name in the credits. So it could be like the end of the Lord of the Rings movies when they had the onering.net listing of all these millions of people and made the credits go for like half of a week. I think it's a similar thing, but I thought that is very, very cool. And it is completely true how this movie was like a mainstay sci-fi film, not only of the 80s, but even today. It holds up unbelievably well.
It is one of my favorite movies ever. It is a movie that holds up well. Probably one of the best sequels ever for being such a good movie that didn't copy the original movie exactly, and an amazing cast. And I think it was, probably everyone agrees, the last great alien movie. So really looking forward to when this comes out.
Yep, totally agree with you. So yeah, so check it out, fans, if you haven't done so already when it does come out. Aliens Expanded. It's funny how there are a lot of shows and movies and that everybody knows that they're coming out months in advance, so they hear the whispers in the wind. But this thing is just out of nowhere, and it was like, oh, okay. So I don't know. You obviously knew what it was, which is kind of groovy. But yeah,
the saddest passing from the Aliens was Sigourney Weaver passing on the check, so she's not involved in this one.
Yeah, well, exactly right. So yeah, absolutely fantastic. So it is all groovy. Yes, most of the cast were killed by the aliens. Is exactly right. Now remember the old xenomorphs, absolutely fantastic. And the good thing about the xenomorphs, they're an absolute pain in the ass, especially in your store. You've got a cabinet full of aliens, and of course they're friggin' tails and all the rest, but they just get wrapped around everything. You go to pull out one from the front, it's hooked onto something at the back, and unbelievably just impractical. Isn't that right?
This is a true story from last weekend. I condensed 2 shelves of aliens into one shelf because there'd been a few sold. And there was one, after I put everything in, there was one at the very back, and someone came in and said, "I'll take that one at the very back." So I had to take everything back out of the shelf that I had just put in a couple of hours previously. But that's just Murphy's Law.
Yeah, I'm almost about to cry a tear of sympathy for you. I like this one. Aliens Expanded. Aliens ate too much Kentucky Fried. So there you go. Oh
Yes.
dear. Oh yes,
Yeah.
absolutely awesome stuff. Anyway, so that was Aliens Expanded. So keep your eyes open for that one. And of course, last Friday. So we came out on Thursday, and the very next day, this came out. It's another trailer, and I thought this one. I don't know where this came from. You got to remember when Lucasfilm announced all these shows a couple of years ago. This was not on the list, and of course, it's Tales of the Empire. And I thought, holy moly, they're going right back into the animation thing again. And to be fair, some of the animation in this is absolutely spectacular. What do you reckon of this, Mr. Aaron? Two stories: the Morgan Elsbeth backstory and the Barriss Offee story.
Well, I'm always in two minds when they flesh out backstories, because sometimes it's better leaving it to your own imagination, because you can never compete with that online. But I think this is actually good. I do really enjoy how I think it must be one of those projects where the animators suggest them, because I can't see there's any big plan, like they have the Marvel timeline where they go, and then we're going to do the Barriss Offee backstory at this point. So I do think they are good because they're only produced because someone has a good idea. I do think the animation is probably consistently at a higher standard than the actual live action stuff. I do love all of it, but I think the animation really steals the show sometimes. What did you think?
From what I saw, I was very impressed. And now suddenly Morgan Elsbeth, who obviously had a lot more of a big role in the Ahsoka series, if they're showing her backstory, that's interesting. But the Barriss Offee one is really interesting, because those who will know that she appeared in Attack of the Clones. She was actually a Padawan to somebody, and turned bad in the Clone Wars and actually attacked the Jedi Temple. There's an entire story regarding her, and her fate is completely left ambiguous. So
Yeah.
to see her backstory, to see how that all occurs, I mean, that's the bit that I'd be really keen to see. So, yeah, it is very good stuff for sure. So, yeah, I applaud them. And I agree with you. I think, like, the writers' rooms can do so much, but someone has to come up with an idea. And I can't imagine it's just all Filoni all the time saying, well, how about we do this and how about we do this? Because this was not on the radar. This was not announced a couple of years ago. So they did Tales of the Jedi, which was 4 stories, and some of that was really good. And so someone has obviously said, yep, do Tales of the Empire as well. It's like, yay, team, especially the Morgan Elsbeth stuff. That's an interesting one. So, yeah,
Yeah.
very, very
The
good.
only problem I sometimes have with the animation is they do the animation. I go, gee, I wish they'd have done that as the live action series, and then Book of Boba Fett could have been the animation or something.
Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum, because you are right. The animation style now, especially for the Star Wars shows, is just spectacular. It looks awesome, but there's always a mindset from people out there who say it's a cartoon, I'm not going to watch it. So you lose a percentage of your audience, regardless of how big a fans they are. I don't know why that works, but they just do.
Well,
And I guess with this, they keep them relatively short, so that's a smart move. But they're
yeah,
not going to appeal to everybody. It's as simple as that.
yeah. People watch us and we're Muppets.
No, well, that's true. I won't deny that at all. So we've always known that. So actually, it's very funny. I was at a friend's place the other night, and they were talking about the guy who voices Kermit the Frog.
Yeah.
And they said apparently whatever it is, whoever does it these days, not Jim Henson, obviously, whoever does it these days got fired recently. And I said, well, you know what his response was when he got fired? Oh, dear. So there you go. Here we go. How about Star Wars Tales? I like Tales, and that's supposed to be Tales, not Tales as in like I've got a tail at the back of me. Tales of me. Oh goodness gracious me! Who'd want to hear tales about me? So,
You could be a Mog, half man, half dog. Your own best
my
friend.
own best friend, exactly right. The animated style gives me a headache. It can. I guess you're not watching it in a cinema, so that's one consolation. But,
I have the best way to avoid a headache with the animation, Christy, is to try and watch it in 3D.
Oh yeah, exactly right. And if that doesn't work for you, go watch Blair Witch Project or Cloverfield afterwards. I like it, Shane. You're right. Only 12 people watch us. We do get some, and I do mean some, who watch us on replay. But yes, to be fair, we're not groundbreaking as yet. We're actually almost at the verge of paying people to go out and promote us to the world. Put us on social media and make a big thing of it. And yes, thank you. Luminari and Dali was the master to Barriss. It was on the tip of my tongue. I just couldn't get there. But it's a fantastic story in the Clone Wars.
Shane, I have a comment for you. Who is more foolish, the fool or the fool that listens to them?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, speaking of listen, I'm going to complete aside. So the big news, of course, that happened is for our fans is the 13th Docky was in town on the weekend at Supernova. I know Shane, I knew just sort of because Shane went along and got autographs and photographs and whatever. She's not blonde anymore. She's gone dark-haired, probably to hide away from the aggro fans. Point. So, but we had a Docky in town. How good was that, Mr. Aaron?
Didn't know anything was on.
Dear, very good. I like this. We are all foolish. Yes, exactly right. Good stuff. All right, so we're going to move along now. Once again, as always, fans, there are going to be spoilers for those who haven't seen this, so be aware of it. Halo Season 2 has been out and about for a little bit now, and I got a chance to watch it this week, which was very, very groovy. And we're going to have a bit of a natter about it because it kind of pushed our buttons. Now, just a bit of backstory for those who didn't know, they were planning to make a Halo movie about 10-something years ago with Peter Jackson. That kind of didn't work, and it ended up being made into District 9. But they've finally made a TV series. The second season is done. For those who are huge fans of the game, stay away. It's as simple as that. It doesn't follow any of the storyline from the games. It is completely the original concept, and they break all these rules that the people of the game can't stand. But for people who don't know the game, like ourselves, it's actually very, very groovy.
It is. I totally agree. The biggest complaint I've heard about it doesn't stick to the game. But if you like good science fiction, there's a lot worse stuff you can watch. And I find it funny that the thing that's complained about the most in this is often complained about in The Mandalorian. Why did they make him take his helmet off? He should never have taken his helmet off.
Well, I said even in the first season, they kind of needed to give this guy some personality, some humanity, because you can have like famous characters who never take their helmets off, but in the end, it's a human story. It's about humans, right?
Yeah.
And even Vader takes his helmet off at the end of Jedi. And even though I can see why people would be annoyed, I can see why they had to do it and create their own continuity, go in their own direction. And of course, in the second season, it humanizes everybody. So you've got the 4 Spartans of the Silver Team. All of them take their helmets off all the time. In fact, John 117, who you just saw, spends more time with his helmet off than anything else because he sort of obviously gets imprisoned and he's a bit of a bad guy in this particular series. And it makes sense. You totally get it. So, but I agree with you in terms of just being a good quality science fiction show and something that looks spectacular, and some of the fight scenes are freaking fantastic. I love it when the Spartans and the Covenant are going together. That, if you ever played Halo at any point, you can really sort of get the connection from that, especially when they do the first person stuff. Yeah.
I can't actually think of many television series that have better Space Marine scenes. This is probably the definitive one for like a new sci-fi show. I mean, they have done Space Marines in other shows, but they've really got that almost cinematic level of special effects and fight coordination and the backgrounds and where they are. I have heard some people say the special effects aren't great, but I've been really happy with all of it.
Yeah, you do wonder if you could see it on a cinematic level how good it would look, but it's completely sells it. And it's kind of interesting because, excuse me, back in the days when they had to try and green screen stuff and things always looked a bit dodgy, everything you see is believable. And I love the fact when you see the cities and all the rest of it, they just look really spectacular. Man, I'm looking at shots like that. And of course, we're seeing this a lot now in a lot of different series, whether it be like things like Foundation or The Expanse, or in this case, Halo. Everything just looks great, including Star Wars. It all just looks great. And it makes you think, well, this is a part of a real world. You can really believe it's legitimate. And for that reason, I found from a visual side, it was great. And the storyline worked because the message that I got out of this is that both the Covenant and the USCN, the United Nations Space Command, they're both vying for power. But the good guys aren't necessarily good and the bad guys aren't necessarily bad, because the good guys do a lot of bad shit. And I really dial into that because there's a big issue when you have the good guys, which is obviously the humans, and they're just so saccharine and they're so sweet. They never do anything wrong. Whereas in this, they're doing everything wrong. And it's great. The heroes are suddenly being turned into enemies. And you look at the Covenant and you go, maybe you guys aren't so bad after all.
Well, what do you do in that situation where, this is spoilers, where they do the numbers and say, we can't save the planet, so we're not even going to bother fighting because we'll lose too many Marines. So they don't tell anyone anything's coming, and the planet is glassed. which is basically bombed until everything turns into glass. So I totally agree with you. It's actually really good to have the shades of grey and not all the, Imperial officers are white English dudes who have like British accents. It really is a broader level. Like some of the scientists do incredibly unethical things for the greater good, and are they evil because they truly believe in what they're doing? I mean, it does make you think.
It does, and it's an interesting concept because, as always with a lot of these shows, we see from the broad perspective of all the different characters. But of course, if you were in universe and being the character, and say in this case, Catherine Halsey, she created the Spartan program and is really, really pushing forward, trying to find the whole Halo thing and whatever else. You can see where she's coming from, and of course, she gets ostracized by her community, gets arrested, and suddenly has to come back. And I agree with you. I mean, scientists, even in real life, will push the boundaries because ultimately they're the only ones who can, and it's up to the rest of us to decide whether what they're doing is the right thing or not. So yeah, there's a lot of things you can connect with regarding the characters. There are some that you're thinking, oh, they're a bit weak. I mean, and the whole thing with Soren and his kid and all that, that's probably I think the weakest story. You can almost fast forward through some of those moments, but when you get into the core storyline, it really goes places. And of course, at the end, it follows once again, because you have the issue with the flood, which is a virus and turns everybody into freaking zombies. What do you reckon about that, Mr. Aaron?
Well, I discussed this with Dags, where I'm like, didn't see that happening in the last episode of the show, because they really did leave it for the last episode. And I was like, oh, this is almost like we're going into the Last of Us territory with virus sort of, I guess, more fungal zombies. There were scenes from that. I was like, that's almost where it, like the zombie stuff comes out of the mouth and things like that. I didn't know that from the show. I guess people who have from the game, people who have watched the game wouldn't have been too surprised, but that was just a total left turn of where I thought the story was going from that. I was also impressed by some of the point of view shots where you would have one camera tracking on the Marines jumping out of a ship, going up to them and seeing what was happening around, and then pulling back, and then going through different styles of cinematography all in one shot, which I don't think I've seen in TV before. I was really impressed by that too.
Yep, I completely agree with you. Shane has said it's like Starship Troopers to a degree, but Starship Troopers had a lot more of the banter. One thing about Halo is very serious. There's no humor in it at all. And you can understand it because it is a war-like environment, and it's an aggressive environment. There's hardly any romance anywhere. It just doesn't really appear. And it feels very realistic when it's like that. So you don't have moments where, and this happens in a lot of shows, and even Star Wars has done this, where you have the heroes in a really dire situation and they'll have a bit of crack jokes with each other, and it's like in this they don't. This is serious stuff. To get killed everywhere, and it's really, really intense, and that makes it really believable, which is kind of cool. Whereas Starship Troopers, there was a little bit of banter between them, but they're different franchises, so I get that, which is a really, really cool. And you are right, Daniel. Yeah, Warhammer 40K will come out at some point, which I believe some famous actor, Ben Affleck or somebody is involved with that. One thing that does look good is the Covenant, right? And everything hinges on how good they look. And I remember from the trailer of the first season, when I saw these guys, they look grouse. And I can't remember what the weapon's called, the big sword thing they bandish about. When the first attack took place between the Covenant and the Spartans in that village, that was me. I was sold after that. I said, this show is grouse, right?
Yes.
That has just worked for me. And I loved it because it was violent. It was nasty.
I was going to say I loved it too, and it was the same as when we talked about Three Body Problem last week, where they didn't hold back on the violence and they went into the town and they just killed everyone on screen. I'm like, this is something different. This is something really, really good.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And of course, the thing about the story is it's unusual in the fact, and this is a massive deviation from the games. But I thought, the games are the games, and I get that because that's a completely different formula. Is you have McKee, which is the female. Well, what would you call her? Sort of like the blessed one, the chosen one in the Covenant. And I guess it might not sound logical as to why an alien species would be so focused on a human, because in real life, if it was us, it's like we wouldn't be focused on an alien to the degree that they are. But you kind of need it because you need that connection. And of course, she's got the connection with the Halo. John 117 has the connection with the Halo. and you can kind of get where it's coming from, and it's kind of necessary. I mean, to be fair, they did kill her in the end of the final season of the last episode of last season, and she's alive again, and they don't explain that. And I was kind of hoping they would cover that off. You would think the Covenant, maybe they've got really good medical facilities and they can just pull the bullets out and whatever, and she's back to life again. But that was probably a bit of a, all right, yeah, no one ever dies in sci-fi, as they say. So,
well,
yeah.
I do like her character because she's been manipulated by religious machinations. So last season, you actually saw the really high up in the Covenant knew that it was all a load of rubbish, and she wasn't, you know, and they were just using her. But because they pushed it, you've actually got people who really do believe she is the chosen one and follow her. And what happens in this series, the fallout is she is followed more than the leaders in the Covenant.
Yeah, which is an interesting conundrum, isn't it? So once again, you're trying to adapt it to a real life scenario, and if you had an alien being on this Earth, and everybody follows that being and discounts what they know from existing religions, you can't even get your head around it. But it's the same principle. You are right, Daniel. I couldn't think of who it was. It was Henry Cavill who's doing Warhammer. That's correct. So one of the other cool things about the show, of course, you have the character of Cortana, and it's actually voiced by the same person and the same lady who does it for the games, which is particularly groovy. The whole advanced AI thing, which is very relevant to our real life society, which I find quite interesting because AI is being pushed so hard now, except in this case, Cortana's stuck in his head, as it were. And I'd be curious to see where that all goes and how that all develops. But it's good to have that nice familiarity from the games in the show as well, which is particularly cool. I agree. There's always a chosen one. Yes, well, there has to be in this case, which is very, very cool.
Yeah, maybe she should marry Luke Skywalker and, you know, cross the franchises and produce the real chosen one.
Well, exactly right. I agree with Blake. Yes, the energy swords. I couldn't think what they were called. They do look good, and it is interesting. Yes, as you said, when the Covenant start fighting amongst themselves, you go, "Well, didn't see that one coming." Yet, ironically, in the human side, they do exactly the same thing: humans versus humans, and you go, the whole thing's completely arse about, and it's all about the corruption of power. And about everybody who has it wants to control it, and they want to ensure that they never lose it. And as you said earlier, prepared to sacrifice everything for it. And it's just like, you can't scratch your head and go, how can the hero of the show suddenly be the villain? But from their perspective, they really do believe that John 117 is now working for the Covenant because of his connections with McKee. And you can kind of get that. And you go, well, you would be suspicious, as is the character Kai, who thinks exactly the same way. So, yeah, it's very, very groovy.
Did you play the games?
I only played it in multiplayer. I never played the main story. So Ads, who's not with us tonight, I used to go to his house and play Halo 2 back in the day. We just played multiplayer. Never actually played the actual single game.
Can I ask a question as someone who hasn't played the games? When you were watching it, were there any nods to the games where you go, oh, they do that in the games and they've put it in, or did you not notice anything like that?
Only small things like the warthogs, the cars. I mean, that's and the weapons, of course, and the way all the characters look. Everything else looks completely different otherwise. But yeah, definitely the warthogs. But there's not much that I picked up on. Other people here tonight would know more about the games than I do. As I said, I only played them in multiplayer, and it wasn't for very long. But absolute power corrupts, absolutely, which is completely true. And of course, in real life, that's exactly what would happen, right? And it's funny how a TV show can echo real life environments as of today, which is just crazy. It's like, look out for number one. Everything else is expendable. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. But that's why it works. So absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. So overall, if you like good science fiction, definitely give it a view. But if you haven't watched any of it, definitely start from series 1.
Yeah, and we have given a few spoilers here, but you can deal with it. But there are some awesome shows that do come out from time to time, and there's a lot of rubbish that comes out. But sometimes a series will come in and you go, you know what? This is good quality. It is button pushing. As we said, if you've played the game, stay away from it. I mean, the shows that we've probably recommended are things like Foundation, things like The Expanse. This is definitely one worth tuning into, because the good thing about science fiction TV shows is they're not grounded in real reality. So when you do visit the Halo and it has that whole ring world kind of look, even though the logic makes no sense, because when you see it in space, it's a ring. And when you're standing on the surface, you look up, you see the sky and you go, that doesn't work. How does that work? But don't worry about that, kids. It's all good. It's all good. But it's you can see where it's all connected, and you're definitely invested in the story and where it's going to go. So,
yeah.
So in the games, the Arbiter was the main character in Halo 2 and 3 and eventually worked with Master Chief. Oh, really? I didn't know that. So the Arbiter is the main bad guy. Showed a picture of him earlier in this, and he's the main person, or the main Covenant guy who's following McKee. So that's him there, the Arbiter, which is very, very groovy stuff. So there you go. Good stuff. What do you reckon there, Mr. Aaron?
Good, and I think you can draw comparisons to The Expanse as well. That would probably be another show that some of the machinations that the military do remind me of as well.
Yep, totally agree with you. Be sure to check it out if you haven't done so already, which is very, very groovy. All right, now guess what? Now it's time for a fantastic segment that I absolutely love. It is time for this.
A question.
Now, I thought of this one yesterday. Actually, I was having a discussion with my other half, and I thought, oh, how does this work these days, right? And this is a bit of a left field question. It's not necessarily related to sci-fi. And Aaron, being a parent, might be able to provide an answer for this. Excuse me. The question I've got is, with the loss of film magazines, do kids still stick posters on their bedroom walls? Now, the reason why I brought that up is because it occurred to me just like yesterday. Back in our day, we used to get the Star Trek poster magazines and the Star Wars poster magazines. Even TV Week had posters in them. You'd rip out the staples, get out the posters, blue tack them to the walls or sticky tape them, depending how you did it. Do kids still do that? And if so, where are the pictures coming from?
Even Big M girl jigsaws had posters in them to put on your bedroom wall too. Yeah, they do. Probably not as much as when we were growing up, just because the whole culture has shifted with pop culture and how kids enjoy and interact with stuff. We have 2 big poster racks in the shop, and they regularly run out of posters. And it's all ages that buy posters. I do have to say, probably the people that buy the most posters probably are teenagers moving out for the first time, and they might come in and buy 10 posters to put all over their new unit or wherever they're moving to. I do find if maybe a grandma comes in with her kids, her grandkids, and they're looking for something, and they're like, what would you suggest that's sort of under $20? And I go, well, do they like posters? The kids are really excited. And one of the things that I find kids like to do, especially younger kids, is flick through all of them and choose something themselves. And there's a different experience from flicking through posters. And every time you flick through the poster rack, you see something different than there is from just picking a toy off the shelf, because you just see it straight away. I don't know, Dags, if you remember growing up when you were a teen or whatever, and you'd loiter at like Doncaster shopping centre, and you'd go into the news agencies all had poster racks then, and there'd be the skeleton sitting on the toilet, or a really nicely arranged bread arrangement. They were the same ones in every shop. They don't really exist anymore. If you go into Kmart and Target, they have the Marvel and DC and Star Wars. Being a retailer, I can order from the people who have them, and we pick the other stuff, because they still do movie posters and horror posters and Doctor Who and other stuff. What do you think from working in the shop with the people who buy posters?
Well, it's very funny you should mention that. There are some really good comments. I'm about to get to them in a second. I was there in the store when 3 people come in, 3 younger people who obviously were moving into a place of their own, and they bought 9 posters, right, from your racks, right, which is funny because I served them. I thought that was really interesting. Now, a few things I want to bring up before I answer your question. I like this. Now, Julie is Blake's mother, and she's also next door. So if I yell, hello, over there, she can probably hear me through the walls. I've learned an all-new language tonight watching us two. What language would that be, Aaron?
Gibberish.
Gibberish. And even she's made a point of saying impact posters. And I'm going to get to my point and why I asked this question in a second, right? Kids seem to want them professional and in frames. That's a very good point, actually, Christy. I totally agree with you on that one. Joe, of course, has said he's got kids who got posters. They bought them from Aaron's. Yep, gotcha. The point being, I agree. You can go to the stores as your store, buy them out of the racks and whatever. But what is missing is when you used to get the magazines, pull out the staples, bang on the. There's one on either side of the on which page, this side, that side, sticking them on walls. So if you don't have access to professionally printed posters, like in your shop or maybe in the shopping centers, where do the posters come from? Now, you would have done it. I did it. right? You got your spaceship ones, you stuck them on the wall from this magazine, that magazine. Is that entire, I wouldn't call it phenomenon, is that entire thing now gone? Do they have to be from the store pre-bought now?
No, no, there are magazines that still have pull-out posters. I think it has changed. When we were growing up and when I was growing up, it was like the Star Trek posters or Star Wars poster magazines. Now it's actually gone more to anime and gaming. So I know my son often will pull a Nintendo poster out of a Nintendo magazine from the newsagents, and he's only bought it for that magazine. So I know they are still around. They're not as prevalent as they used to be, but you can still get poster magazines.
So that was interesting, because I thought, if a younger person is going into a newsagent to buy a magazine, that would have to be such a foreign concept to them, because everything now is digital. You want to see a picture of something, you just look it up online. Oh, I want to see a poster of the Starship Enterprise. Bang, there it is. There's an image. There's a GIF or a JPEG. What do I do now? I can't put that on my wall. Where do I get pictures from? And that's the case. So if there are young people, and your kids, one of them, who actually will physically walk into a newsagent, which by itself must seem like a very, very foreign concept, buying a magazine, which is almost like completely brain straining, because magazines by and large are dying. I'm just thinking, is that whole phenomenon just disappearing? Because for us, getting the magazines with the posters in them, sometimes they have eight or 10. First thing you do is rip out the staples and go, oh, which side am I going to stick up? And I was just wondering if that's not around anymore. So,
well, the thing that's totally gone, which I do miss and I loved when I was growing up, is when you would walk into a video library and they had a cardboard box in the corner and it had free poster, one per person, and you'd unroll them and it'd be like, oh, she's having a baby, put that one back. Oh, like Scrooged, put that one back. Oh, Ghostbusters, like, good find, take that. It was like an extra incentive to go to the video library and rent stuff, because there was that experience of, they were going to throw it out, but you get something really cool for free. And of course, those are the harder posters to get, because often stuff that didn't do well in the cinema or didn't even make it to cinema got posters at the video library. And I remember poster collectors were quite snobbish about video library posters at the time, because they're not the American one sheets and all of that. And now they're just impossible posters to find. And once in a while, I will find something that was released at a video library and it's got written on the back a name, because someone's obviously gone and reserved it before they gave it away. That's the experience I wish kids could still have.
True. Some of those posters they did customize and design for video stores, as opposed to just getting the movie poster and sticking a CBS video on it. I like this one from Rusky Bo. Still has his fan film posters on the wall. Some looking a bit moth-eaten, much like the fan films or the people who worked on them, i.e. me. Mentioned about Sci-Fi Monthly. That's what I'm referring to, Sci-Fi TV Monthly. And you couldn't get enough of these things. If anything, you ran out of wall space. And of course, what made me think of this is I remember, now it was more for music related things, like your TV Weeks of the World, where you put up pictures of bands, musical artists, whatever else. And I was at a friend's place one time, and they completely decked out the entire bathroom of posters they got from magazines. And that's what made me think of it the other day. Go, can anybody even do that now? Even if they wanted to do it, can they still do it? And it's a lost art form, because the last thing I would find weird is if you walked into a kid's bedroom, say a 15-year-old kid's bedroom, and the walls are blank, or they've got everything's framed. You go, where's the blue tack marks? Where's the sticky tape? Where's the dodgy pictures that are like half falling off the walls? So
it is. I don't know if they still do music magazines, because everything's still online, and like the countdown where you could get your supply of Wah Wah Nee and Boom Crash Opera and things like that. It just doesn't happen anymore. Something I've got to bring up. We got a collection of old Star Trek fan magazines in the shop a couple of weeks ago, and they were so chockers full of celebrity posters, they must have run out. I sent a picture to Dags and said, "Who is this?" It was featured in a Star Trek magazine as a pin-up, and it was Terry Farrell's double. So it wasn't even, I thought it was like maybe it's under alien makeup or something, but they actually gave a pin-up of Terry Farrell, who's Jadzia Dax, her double in a fan magazine, and she was an attractive actress. But I thought that would never happen now, where they put such a random poster in a magazine.
Yes. So when you when you take it down, you can say you've dropped your Dax. Unbelievable. Now I agree with you, Shane. Samantha Fox was indeed a massive pin-up girl back in the day. I mean, if you wanted posters of women, guys, whatever, can you even get them now? I wouldn't even be surprised if you couldn't. But absolutely
Well,
unbelievable.
that is the thing. Sorry, we talked about Impact posters. They are probably the main distributor in Australia because they've got all the good licenses. There is no Chiquito girl posters anymore. That kind of thing is probably too frowned on to be mainstream.
Yeah, yes, exactly right. Shane has said the daughter bought 3 copies of a Taylor Swift magazine so she could be pulled apart and placed on the walls. That and hopefully you said to her, Shane, this is what we used to do all the time, right? You'd buy the poster magazine with the sole intention of ripping it apart and getting out the picture. And the one thing you hated is when you had a poster on each side of the page and you wanted both of them. It's like, what do you do? What do you do? It was a fantastic part of life, and it was a part of growing up, and it was a part of individuality. How do you individualize your place? I was rapt when I finally got the opportunity to put Star Trek pictures on my walls. I thought it was the greatest thing ever. This is the Dags room, right? You walk in, you're walking into a nerd's room the way it should be. And I just think that's kind of lost now. So, yeah.
Shane might have had Samantha Fox. I had the Sea Devils and the...
Yeah.
I had the Sea Devils and the Sontarans and the Silurians, so I was way cooler.
Oh, yeah, right, exactly right. Now, okay, this fans, this is actually quite important because we've got one of these coming up. So the absolutely love it. How's this? There was even a Salvage One poster magazine. Who would have bought that? Salvage One. God, they must be desperate for sales that day. What the hell, man?
The same person that was buying the Quark magazines.
Absolutely fantastic. Anyway, so I just thought it was an interesting part of history. And look, I don't really know, but I thought it would be kind of interesting to say, well, it was a part of what we all did. And even in movies now, if you watch things like E.T. and even Tron Legacy or whatever, they're set in the 80s with a kid's bedroom wall and they've got posters on the walls. And you go, yeah, that's exactly what we used to do. And it's a shame if it's not available anymore. Or if people say, oh, I'm a big fan of this, can I get pictures of that? No. And you go, well, why not? They used to be out there, but they're not anymore.
When you watch the Bumblebee movie, which is a Transformer movie, the girl in that has Sci-Fi posters all over the wall. And it just broke my disbelief because there was no girl in the 80s that had Tom Baker posters on the wall.
If only you could get, if you need your TARDIS to go back in the time machine to end up in her bedroom, walk in and go, hey, I'm Aaron Challenger. Do you want me to talk to you about the jockey? That's just absolutely fantastic. And one of the Starlog poster mags, and they were very, very popular. We all did it at the time, which is a very, very cool. So good stuff. Anyway, that's our question without warning for this week. And I bet it started off a chain reaction of people out there thinking, oh, my God, I had this and I had this and this and this and this. It was a fantastic time. But at least you are right. If you do want posters for your walls, although they tend to be quite big, get them in your store. And as I say to customers who walk in looking at the posters thinking, oh, these are awesome. And they say, we've got no wall space. And I said, stick them on the damn ceiling. That's untapped real estate up there. So, yes, very, very cool. I love it. There were no girls with Sci-Fi posters. I'll be curious. Christy's watching. I wonder if Christy's going to say, wait, I was one of them. So, yes, exactly right. And everyone will remember the Princess Leia poster from Star Wars. Used to get from a magazine, when she got the gun pointing at the camera. Oh, fantastic. Very good. All right, we shall move on to something completely different. What do you reckon about that, Mr. Aaron?
And now for something completely different. Yes, we're going on to our main discussion.
We've got our discussion. We've got 15 minutes to get through. It is the films, and we're actually allowing some TV shows of Richard Donner. And of course, Richard Donner was famous for the Superman movie of the late 70s. Not just Superman, but also kind of Superman 2 as well, which was an interesting sort of saga unto itself, amongst many other things. Mr. Aaron, where did you want to kick off our chat about Mr. Richard Donner?
Well, when we try and choose interesting things that maybe haven't been hashed over a lot when we do these shows, and there are endless videos of the films of George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, but Richard Donner probably has as big a hit rate and has as many beloved films as those other directors and producers, and I just don't think he's discussed as much. And his career when I was looking at this episode is unbelievable. If you go back to his early career before he was a motion picture director, the TV series that he worked on was like a hit list of stuff that still is beloved and watched today. You've got, he directed The Twilight Zone. I don't know how many pictures Dags have got, but I'm going to run off a few. The Twilight Zone, Rifleman, Gilligan's Island, Man from U.N.C.L.E. A lot of these sort of, it's almost like his career all the way through was pop culture stuff that's still enjoyed today, and that's really unusual because you do look at, you know, Steven Spielberg's early television career. We're gonna, yeah, Lethal Weapon definitely, and the TV shows he done are pretty average, you know, Columbo and stuff like that. But Richard Donner really did have, I don't know if the studio system allowed him to pick what he was doing, he did have a really good pop culture grounding. You know, he'd be doing Get Smart, and then he'd be doing, like I said, he did a lot of westerns, did a lot of sci-fi, did a lot of comedy, but they're a lot more hit series than ones that I didn't know about. So even the westerns that I didn't watch, I'd still, like, you know, you'd still instantly know Gunsmoke and all of that kind of thing that he was doing. So he had a really good grounding in popular culture TV before he launched into his movie career. And he did a whole lot of different genres too, which is amazing. I can't say I've individually watched any episodes that I knew were Richard Donner, but he has done a lot of my favorite shows.
Yeah, when you're talking about the Twilight Zone, he actually became involved in the 5th season, and I totally agree with you. I mean, you look at his list of both his filmography and his TVography, whatever you want to call it, and it's like, my God, there's a lot. That's a big, long list back there. But one from the Twilight Zone, in particular, the original Twilight Zone, one of the episodes he did direct, of course, was Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, which has gone on to be like a symbolic episode from that series. It's the one that everybody remembers, and of course, it was remade in the Twilight Zone, the movie back in the 80s. But Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, where you got an alien on an airplane and only one person can actually see it on board, that was the episode that he directed. So if it's one thing to say, you got this famous person who's famous now who directed these episodes, and a lot of the stuff just went into obscurity, but to direct one of the most popular episodes of the entire series is certainly saying something, which is particularly cool. And of course, his other claim to fame, sorry, just quickly regarding Twilight Zone, of course, he got to work with Robbie the Robot in the Brain Center of Whippy. So he's dabbling in the sci-fi genre in multiple forms at that particular time, which is very, very gritty.
There are actually some amazing facts there. I did not know that he had done that episode, which is, of course, probably, as you said, really well known, but it's also one of my favorite episodes. It is a gripping piece of television to watch. The only thing that doesn't hold up is maybe the monster now, but it's still very suspenseful and still very watchable. So it is good to know that not only did he do these shows, he did some of the better episodes of these shows.
Yeah, exactly right. But everybody sort of knows him pretty much, or he got sort of like super famous because of what happened with Superman. And it's kind of interesting that even by today's standards, like what, nearly 40 years later, 35, 40 years later, Superman the movie is still regarded as one of the best superhero movies ever made, especially one of the best, if not the best, Superman film. And the funny thing about that is that you can just imagine when they were making it at the time, they didn't know where it was going to go, what it was going to be. It was great, breaking ground everywhere. How do you make a dude fly? And of course, that's really cutting edge. How do you show all the stuff on Krypton, the growing up, just the growing up of Kal-El himself or Clark is a spectacular bit of filmmaking. And you got to say that Richard really did put made the whole thing as successful as it was.
Well, the thing about Superman, and we could probably spend the whole 15 minutes talking about Superman, it is probably that and Batman Returns are my favorite superhero movies ever. But you look at the background to that, and it was backbreakingly hard on Richard Donner. And especially he had fights with the producers, the Salkin brothers, and they basically took him off the other movie, and then they made them refilm just enough so they could take his name off as the director, even though they'd pretty much filmed most of it. And it was because he had a vision of what he wanted to do, and he wouldn't like compromise on his vision. I guess, you know, the studio is putting up the money. But when the first movie came out and it was a massive success, it was a pride thing by the Salkins to still get rid of him for the second movie. And that movie has so many innovations. I mean, the poster, I remember as a kid, you will believe a man could fly. And the first trailer was basically they strapped a camera to the front of a jet and just flew through clouds to sort of, represent Superman. And the first time I saw it, I didn't see it at the cinema. I saw it on TV over a 2-night special event, like a mega cut. And I'm sure a lot of people our age probably were introduced to Superman for the first time like that. And I was absolutely blown away. But you can watch it now after 40 years of sci-fi movies and special effects getting better. And you've got all the different actors and, sci-fi and comic books are now mainstream. And it still, as Dag said, holds up as one of the best superhero movies ever made.
Yeah, the sequence, and I've always said this, where Jarrell has doing the big long spiel about growing up and whatever else, and you transition from the young Clark Kent to Superman, and he flies for the first time towards the camera and off. I still, even today, think that is one of the greatest sequences in cinematic pop culture history, because you actually look at it and go, the dude is flying for real. It's not a green screen job. It's actually legitimate. And that is just a magic moment. And if anything, that really resonates with you in a big way. Of course, as you said, with Superman 2, he did get the flick from that, and Richard Lester came on board. There was a lot of mucking around. I think Superman 2, the end result turned out quite good. They did produce the Richard Donner cut, which took decades to come out, but they finally produced it. Kind of works, kind of doesn't work, but by the same token, it was a completely different vision at the time. But It would have been hard for the guy to say, he's created this fantastic franchise and they've just kicked him out of it, which is very unfortunate. Yeah,
it is unfortunate, but I do think that a lot of superhero movies now owe a lot to just Richard Donner, because the producers, they thought they were producing something in tone of the Batman TV series that was going to be very comic book and tongue in cheek. And then they went for this epic movie, which had never really been done with a comic book before, and it just worked so well.
I have, and we're going to get another dose of this. We've got 3 of them this time. It's a fun factoid. Rusky Babes is going completely troppo at the moment. He did, fun fact, he did 6 episodes of the Banana Splits.
They were his defining moments.
They were. I like that one. His first movie was X-15 with Charles Bronson and Mary Tyler Moore. And, of course, he did The Omen. Yes, he did. And as we said, there were some massive films that he did, like The Lethal Weapons, as we mentioned earlier. This one I found out today, this is more fantasy than sci-fi. This was a big hit when it came out, Lady Hawk.
Yes.
With Michelle Pfeiffer and I've forgotten the other guy's name.
Matthew
Rutger Hauer. Thank you. And I saw this in the cinema.
Broderick.
And Matthew Broderick, that's right. And it was a hugely successful movie, and I didn't realize he did that. So you are right. He had a lot of fingers and a lot of pies, which is really groovy. So he covered a lot of different bases for different audiences.
Well, that's the thing. I often find Spielberg works where he's in the sort of genre that he does well, and then when he moves into other genres, it's hit or miss. But Richard Donner, I think, is very consistent in everything he did. We mentioned The Omen, one of the best horror movies ever made.
Oh, that'll be the phone. Oh, there we go. So who's ringing up Aaron right now? You know, they're ringing up Aaron to say, you forgot this, you forgot to mention that, you forgot to mention this. So
that was the wife who's obviously forgotten we're doing this. The Omen.
It's the wife. She's about to say, you forgot to mention this movie. Yes, exactly right. Yeah. Sorry, keep going.
So, Omen, fantastic cast. Gregory Peck, David Warner, who's been in a lot of amazing things. Patrick Troughton, the second Doctor Who. Omen works because they take everything so seriously. And the thing that if you send up a horror movie, you start adding jokes into it, it doesn't work. And that is one of the amazing things. As a director, though, and I've took this tip, and if any parents out there, you can take this tip and it actually works. To get Damien to smile evilly, he got a close-up of him and he said to the actor, do not smile. It's really important you don't crack a smile. You've got to be serious. You've got to be serious. You've got to be serious. And of course, the little kid cracks up and he gets the perfect smile of evil that he wanted, because that's a good director, giving the wrong direction to get the result that he wanted. And Carl's whole life when he was little, at birthdays and everything, go, do not smile. I want a serious one. I want a serious one. And you actually get amazing smiles. So that's a tip that I got from a director that works in real life.
Yes, especially when you're dealing with children. Yeah, you give them it's reverse psychology, which is particularly cool. It's finally happening. That'll be the phone call. Jeepers creepers. That is very, very cool. But yes, I tend to agree with you. I mean, you look at the pantheon of all the famous directors throughout the world, and there is a big long list of them as well. But yeah, you are right. Richard kind of gets dropped down the list a little bit, which is very unfortunate. And a lot of the movies he's made have entertained generations of people and still do so even today, which is the most important thing.
Goonies is
Yes.
something that hasn't, and that's again in that era where E.T. came out and a lot of these really amazing kids show. Goonies is up there with all of those in popularity, and so many remember his movies with such fondness. We talked about Lethal Weapon. We're obviously going to run way out of time talking about Richard Donner, but he is one of those directors all through his career. Maverick obviously got on so well with the people that he worked with. They would come and do movies with him in different genres as well. So Scrooged and all these other movies that you know, everyone knows them. I don't know if everyone knows they were Richard Donner movies though, but I was absolutely shocked by his actual back catalogue of what he actually had done.
So, as we're about to wrap up, if you can catch up with one of the 6 Banana Splits episodes, maybe the bananas will actually fly. Dun, 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 dun. And we're talking about the John Williams music. Absolutely fantastic. So, yeah, I can't imagine banana peels kind of flying like a la Superman, but
you will
go on. What?
You will believe a banana can fly.
How does he do it? By the skin of his teeth, exactly right. But the cool thing is the history's there, and even though Richard is no longer with us, the work still is, and he'd be looked upon for all eternity as an absolute genius for the work that and the films that he's left us and TV series, which is particularly cool. What do you reckon there, Mr. Dude, Mr. Aaron?
Well, I would absolutely love to see some of his movies back in the cinema again. We get a lot of, you know, places like the Astor or the Valhalla, the Westgarth do retrospectives of different movies, but I've noticed not a lot of his stuff really comes back. Even Superman, I can't remember that coming back to the movies. So that would be the thing I'd like to revisit some of his stuff back in the cinema.
Yeah, I do remember when Superman was on TV decades ago, back in the 80s, they did the 3-hour version. It just fit on a videotape and the world's longest end credits with all the deleted scenes put back in. And that to me was the definitive version. I absolutely loved it, which was very, very cool. Speaking of things being cool, it is time for us to disappear into the night. Now, as always, if you haven't done so already, be sure to check out the Sci-Fi Zone socials and YouTube and Instagram and blah, 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 blah. There's always stuff coming out. But most important of all, for your Superman stuff, got to go to Mr. Aaron's Collectibles. How good is this, Mr. Aaron?
We have a huge range of everything from Superman to Batman, Star Wars, Marvel, DC, vintage toys like He-Man, G.I. Joe, Transformers. At the moment, we've been putting a particularly large 80s collection into the shop that's been very popular and very successful, as in we're selling it really fast. So I'm in a good mood this week. What do you think, Dags?
Absolutely fantastic. And of course, as was mentioned earlier, if you want to check out all of your posters, you want posters for your walls, even though they actually look, the quality is that good, you don't want to blue tack them or sticky tape them. At least with magazine posters, they were rubbish. So you can just go dang, dang, dang. And they already had the mark in the middle with the staple holes. No one cared about what the condition they were going to be in. Whereas your ones, the impact posters, they do look good enough to frame. Which is quite good. If you can get to do that, they will look spectacular on your wall. Maybe we'll produce a poster of just you and I going, it'll be a dartboard for somebody. What can I say? Absolutely fantastic. Very, very cool. There we go. Visiting the store on Saturday, Mr. Carlos. So, yes, I'm very, very groovy. We're going to be, visited by the ultimate Greg King himself, which is very cool. All right, we're going to buzz off for this evening. We'll see you all next week. Make sure you party hard and rock on. And as always, make sure you stay nerdy. What do you reckon, Mr. Aaron?
Have a good night, guys. See you.